I'm going to start with tips and tricks. And I want to start specifically by recognizing the members of the Global Innovation Gathering, which is a community of innovators from around the world, including some of the people on the call here today. And they have a fundraising group. It's like a sort of like a self-help group sort of thing, but where they even have sessions where if people really need to get some fundraising done, you can drop in and do some writing together. But they have a fundraising group where opportunities are shared, and where there are relevant opportunities for makerspaces, I'll be sharing them with the people on this call. But yeah, thanks to the members of the Global Innovation Gathering for this first section. This is a little bit more basic and less about style and so on, but these are nonetheless, I think, some really good tips and tricks. First thing to say, answer all the questions. Ensure all the required information outlined in the call for proposals is addressed. I, this week, lost a $100,000 funding opportunity because we didn't attach the accounts of one of the partners of one of the project, of one of the parts of one of the projects. I'm furious with them, with the donor, but they had hundreds of applications, so they, which I'm also cross about because they shouldn't have that many applications if they don't have that much money. But even so, you really have to make sure that everything is answered. Don't give them any excuse to reject you on a simple thing like making sure that the answers are complete and you're giving everything that you need to give. You need to highlight the reasoning for your project. You need to explain the context in the scenario and why this context requires action. You need to highlight the gap you intend to fill or the problem you intend to alleviate with your project. Highlight the risks if nothing is to be done about the issue or the problem. What might happen in the future if you don't do this work. You can outline and explain the methodology of your project. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more about some approaches that I use on this during the session. Highlight the intended outcomes of the project and the impact of these outcomes. And I would say it's good here to mix quantitative with qualitative. So don't just talk about the numbers, also say, for example, there was this story about something that happened to someone that made a big difference. Outline how the outcomes will be maintained after the funds cease. There is no such thing as a sustainable project. Projects, by definition, have a beginning and an end. There's no such thing as a sustainable project, but every donor would like to think that the change that you make with your project will be sustained. So have an understanding in some, try to explain how that might be done. So in the case of this project, and this particular activity of this project where I'm training on fundraising, one of the ways that we're going to sustain the outputs is we're going to publish all of the resources openly. We're going to publish them online. That will help more people to adopt them. It will help you to go back and refer to them. But it will also, by delivering training, the theory is, as with all educational processes, we're going to empower you to be more successful in the future and more successful with fundraising, which will help your makerspaces to sustain themselves in the longer run by doing more projects. Make connections to broader strategic policies or values of the donor. So if the donor is particularly interested in climate change, when you give examples of the impact, use examples of climate change. If your donor is particularly interested in scientific research, use examples of scientific research. But also related to policies of the government or international bodies like the Sustainable Development Goals or the Africa 2063 agenda or the latest Nigerian innovation policy. Weave in a justification from academic papers or grey literature. And you'll see in some of the examples I'm showing, there's lots of sort of brackets with references. So being able to reference and back up what you said is quite good. Now, a lot of donors don't actually give you the opportunity to do that. But if you, for example, are asked to submit a PowerPoint deck, then you have the opportunity in the bottom corner to quote the reference. So try and do that as much as possible because it lends authority to your bid. You have to convince people as to why you're an appropriate organization to lead such a project. And part of that is your track record. So what have you done before that has led you to the point where you can do this? So previously, you might have done work on gender aspects of making. So maybe you've done training courses for young women who have dropped out of school to learn how to make products in the makerspace. The follow-on from that might be, well, now that they know how to make things, they need some training in marketing, or they need some training in how to design packaging, or whatever it might be, and you can sort of build on previous projects. That's a fairly simple example, but yeah, show any relevant projects. And you know, this gets easier over time. As you're more successful with fundraising, you've got more to show in terms of track record. It's really hard when you're new. Highlight challenges you may face in the project and alongside mitigation strategies. So a challenge right now for us in this project, in this moment today, in this webinar, and literally one that we have designed into the project, is what if you guys aren't listening right now? Do you see what I mean? Like, it's kind of, there's a risk that...
So how do you know?
Yeah, so there's a couple of, the other trainers are doing a better job at this, of being more participatory. In this case, someone interrupting and saying, so how do you know? In Steve's case, you know, or asking questions or whatever, you know, that's really good. And making sure taking attendance at the session is actually the most basic thing. And that's what we said we would do to the donor. In this case, it's taking attendance and then tying the attendance to the payment of the grants, sort of thing. So for those of us in, for those makerspaces in Kenya, Ghana, and South Africa. But yeah, the mitigation strategy is if somebody doesn't turn up to all the sessions, they don't get the grant. And it's a way of, it's a pretty brutal mitigation strategy, but that's one of the risks. Another risk might be the connectivity is bad. If the connectivity is bad and someone can't join a session on a particular day, then maybe part of the mitigation for that is, well, we'll send them some money in the grant so that they can pay for the connectivity to join the sessions and anything else. So there's some fairly basic examples, but I think it's also useful to have some higher level risks, such as political disruption, currency fluctuations, things like that, as long as you've got mitigation strategies. And thanks for the comment in the chat there, Steve. Exactly. Outline a clear plan or schedule of activities, organizing your answers. Being unclear about what you plan to do is a cardinal sin in fundraising. And yeah, it's really difficult to do that. I'm going to show you some examples of how I've done that. It's difficult to do that if the project isn't the most obvious thing, or if part of the project is to figure out what you're going to do during the project. But yeah, there's ways of organizing your answers there. So we'll cover that in a bit more depth with some examples in the session. But yeah, trying to be clear what you're actually going to do is good advice. I mean, this is a fairly straightforward one, but outline the budget required and how you plan to use it. if you are pitching to a donor that doesn't have an application form, let's say it's a private foundation of a rich philanthropist or something, or to another charity that doesn't really give out grants very often, but maybe you want to partner with them on some project. Yeah, outline the budget required and how you plan to use it. And I would suggest talking about that relatively early, even if it's just the budget sketch that we spoke about in the previous session, so that you have a bit of a sense of transparency with the donor. And that helps you to build authority. Clearly state your goals and objectives. Be able to succinctly summarize your project in 2 or 3 sentences. The Innovative Manufacturing in Africa project is about supporting makerspaces to be more financially sustainable, so that they can continue to have the wide range of social and economic impacts that they've been shown to have. And it's also about building an ecosystem, making them stronger by helping them with an ecosystem around it. And the stronger the ecosystem, the stronger the members can become as well.